My name is Joel Larson, and I'm the Institutional Advancement Reporting Manager at the University of Washington. I use Facebook, so I get to lead this panel. So, or moderate. I'm not leading it. I'm moderating the panel. When we got together ahead of time to discuss what the panel was going to be, we wanted to reach out more than just Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, what the common perception of social media would be. We want to kind of extend that out to include all electronic communication, so our email strategies, all the previously mentioned things, but also the collecting data from outside sources and how that is integrated into our plans and our projects and into our main production databases. In preparing for today, I went out and found a survey, the 2011 survey of nonprofits in social media. And there are some really interesting things. Since 2009, the number of nonprofits successfully generating revenue via social media has gone up from 38% in 2009 to 46%, and that's raising anywhere from $1 to $10,000 via social media, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, those kinds of things. 4 out of 5 nonprofits indicate that they find their commercial social media efforts valuable. The survey makes a distinction between commercial social media and house social media, so in internally developed social media tools, they separate those out into a separate category. There were thousands of nonprofit organizations that they surveyed for the survey, and they found 27 of them that they considered master social fundraisers, and that means that they raised more than $100,000 via Facebook. And 30% of those were small nonprofit organizations that had an annual budget of $1 to $5 million a year. The rest of this, we'll kind of come up. Let me begin by having our panel introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Shawn. I'm a senior computer software engineer at the University of Washington. I have served in advancement for about 17 years now. 15 of those years was as Director of Information Management for the University of Washington. Part of the reason that I moved to our central computing area was because I have a real passion for plumbing data systems together, by being able to take advantage of that collection of silos or shadow systems across our university and trying to make that really into information to help support advancement. I see social media as being sort of another data set out there that's creating challenges for us to be able to see how to integrate that into our work processes and what we're doing. That's what I'm here.
I'm Rebecca Whitham. I'm from Woodland Park Zoo. I'm the Public Relations Coordinator at the zoo. So I was hired really to do traditional media. I started and still do working with media, TV, newspapers, all of that. And but when I started there about 3-4 years ago, that was when the zoo started getting really excited about social media. I thought, well, she does communications, she can talk to people, that's what it's all about, let's stick it with her. So I've kind of been learning social media on the job, and it's actually become a huge part of our public relations strategy.
I'm Kelly Hilst. I work at KEXP, which is a nonprofit radio station at the University. It's not at the University of Washington, but they hold our license and we work with advancement. But I work in KEXP's development department. I'm the grants and communications coordinator. So I work with communications that are not solicitation related. So all of our newsletters and things like that go out. Our programming team primarily handles, throughout the year, our social media, but we have dedicated fundraising campaigns, and during that time, the development team takes over the traditional social media channels. So that's kind of my role, and it's not all year round, it's just from the development perspective during our campaigns.
Well, Rebecca, you kind of alluded to this. Can you talk a little bit more about, and then Shawn and Kelly, if you could chime in, how your organization got into social media and how you kind of set your strategy and got yourself started?
Sure. So when I started at Woodland Park Zoo, we had already put a couple of videos up on YouTube because we thought, hey, why not? That sounds like a cool idea. Gave ourselves a terrible screen name that we're stuck with now for life. We had
What is it?
Dahalcon. It was our videographer's spam email address that he just wanted to, oh, I'll just do it on my side email address. Well, great, now we're stuck with it.
But you got zoo.org.
We do have zoo.org, so that's pretty badass. So that had been started, and we had started a blog. Our web manager had started a blog without really telling anyone, because he thought if he had asked permission, he probably wouldn't get it. So he had just kind of quietly done it and was telling some really cool stories on there. So when I had gotten there, it was this cool thing that we were experimenting with, but it really wasn't an institutional thing. It was born out of the communications department because that's the storyteller department, and they had sort of seen the potential to use social media as a way to show the other side of the zoo. So a lot of people think of the zoo as a fun place to go with your kids to see some animals, and it is that, but it's also so much more. We're a nonprofit, we're mission-based, and we're all about conservation and education. And those sides of the stories and what happens with the animals when the park closes, or what happens behind the scenes when they're getting vet care, and sort of all of those stories. There's so much story potential, and they saw social media as being a sort of outlet for that. So it came out of the communications department. When I started, we started to sort of formalize it a bit more. We joined Twitter, we created a Facebook page, and I'd say it wasn't until a year into that we figured out what the heck we were doing with all of those things. They were just kind of, we were doing it because we thought we should be doing it. It wasn't really until a year later that we said, maybe we should have some goals, and maybe this should actually be integrated with what we do as a department and how our department works with the rest of the institution. And we're still kind of figuring all of that out, but I think it went from something that was a casual, hey, why not, to something that's really a strategic piece of what we do as an institution.
I would kind of echo many of those sentiments. Our social media outlets really are a platform for our mission. So we share in-studio performances, we share upcoming events. We post quite a bit through our social media channels, primarily about the music that we're involved with and mission-based things. Even during our fundraising campaigns, we still try to bring it back to the mission. And I think that over the last few years, that's how things have really started to grow, because things are always in social media evolving. And so we're just trying to, we try to integrate them as it comes along. And so over the last few years, we've really seen how important it can be during our fundraising campaigns. And so I would say about 3 years ago is when we really kind of realized, hey, we have this huge audience in the social media sphere. We've been emailing people during our campaigns, but there's all these people that we can reach in this way. And so we sort of felt our way through that, starting by, we're having our membership drive, just kind of educating people about what was going on. But then we realized that there's a much more strategic way that we could be doing it, and we wanted to, along the way, kind of measure what was going on. So we were worried that during our fundraising campaigns, we were posting about once an hour during different people. So we do on-air fundraising campaigns as a public radio station, and so we're posting about once an hour, which is quite a bit on Facebook and Twitter. And so our programming department was worried that by posting all that content that's related to fundraising tangentially, that we were going to be losing our audience. But through measuring the audience throughout the campaign, we actually realized that the opposite was true, that we were gaining followers, that people were sharing more, they were engaging with it. So kind of by measuring that, we realized, okay, this is not harming, it's helping. And we realized that this is a really important way that we can reach people during our fundraising campaigns by showcasing our mission. So,
Shawn, before you answer the question, Kelly, KEXP kind of has a unique story on how it kind of came to be. Could you kind of share how, because KEXP kind of was founded on the premise of somebody wanted to share. So could you kind of tell KEXP's story just a little bit, like where it came from and how it came to be, and
sure.
How you guys kind of became a self-sustaining station?
KEXP was started at the University of Washington in the 1970s. They were KCMU, and they were in the communications building, for those of you who are on the UW campus. And until 2000, they were on the UW campus. And in 2000, they moved off of the UW campus to our current station, which is at Dexter and Denny right now. And that was through the help of Paul Allen. And people are always wondering what our relationship to Paul Allen is. There's still sort of a conception of, oh, well, that's Paul Allen's radio station. You know, we don't need to be member supported. He takes care of that. But the truth is that he was going to give KEXP a 10-year grant to cover operating deficits, but we actually front-loaded that, and so it was a 3-year grant that he provided to the organization, and each year the operating deficit got smaller. And so by 2006, we were financially self-sustained. Right now we're about 60% member supported, and then we have about 30% from business contributors and underwriting, and then 10% from other sources, in-kind donations and grants and things like that. So we grew. We had, a benefactor who was really interested in providing this unique resource to the city. But then, as we started to grow, we realized that this really is a resource that the city is interested in, and then with our website growing, we were the first station to, I guess this is an important part of our history, is that we were the first station to offer uncompressed CD quality sound over the internet. And that was largely because of UW's technology department. KEXP was sort of a testing lab for all of the technological resources that the university had. And so because of the university's innovations, we were kind of able to put those into practice. And so that was one of the really exciting things about our station. And so because we were over the internet, it allowed us to have a worldwide audience. And so right now we have about 14,000 individual donors from all over. 40% are outside of our broadcast area, and we are at a $4 million budget. So we've grown from an organization that was run by 2 students. I think there were 2 paid staff, and now we've grown into a $4 million organization.
So back to the original question, Shawn.
Well, what the original question
was? How did your organization?
Things sort of evolved. Well, the University of Washington is a very large place, and so entrepreneurialism happens all over the place. My perspective is that I think social media evolved fairly slowly at the University of Washington. I would say it started out with our online alumni directories. Printing a book and making that available was sort of our first way to sort of help connect people, and people would go out and look up their own name and really remember kind of their connections and stuff. Then it turned into an online directory, and about the time that MySpace was very popular and Facebook was just starting to come into its own, or to hit people's radar, we signed a contract with a company called Affinity Circles, and they had they offered sort of a social media portal that you could actually kind of own and control as part of the institution or the university. So we would feed our data into that. They would sort of provide the facility for people to connect and share stories and such. And that was a very traditional model. It's a vendor relationship or a service model that we're familiar with. Typically with vendors, we love to have a contract. We love to supply data, know exactly what happens if we don't renew the contract. We like to know what happens in case of a security breach or what have you, and then we like to make sure that we can get the data back. So with MySpace and Facebook, initially there was a lot of kind of hesitation because we don't have any leverage with these people. We don't pay them money. We don't have a data contract with them, so we sort of felt like we had to do it on our own. I think the alumni community kind of voted with their adoption or lack of adoption of the system that we tried to provide, and I think since then we've been kind of watching Facebook trying to get as many likes out there on our pages and such. But from a data model perspective, it's been a very different thing for us to try to engage with on a data level.
Is that a good segue into our audio-visual portion?
I think it is. The one thing I would add first, though, is I think that we've been more successful on the email side, largely because that's a more traditional model for us, where we do have a contract, we do have data fields that we can query from, segment, and do our broadcast emails, and then collect information back. It's more sort of on what we traditionally think of as the social media, that is sort of an uncontrolled environment that we have to modify, both culturally and in our processes, to be able to adapt into.
So with that,
I don't know if you can see that very well, but there's just some amazing statistics about Facebook. One of the things that showed was that every 20 minutes, 2.5 million photos are uploaded into Facebook, which means that during this session, there'll be well over 7 million photos posted worldwide. And the number of updates and friend requests and things that are happening out there is just staggering. Even if you're familiar with the numbers, as you see them updated, you see the accelerated growth of the adoption of Facebook. It still is a shocking thing.
one of the several weeks ago, I heard an interesting statistic with the advent of the camera phone that we take as many pictures, I think, in an hour as the entire history of man has since the invention of the camera prior to that hour, or since like 2008 or something like that. Every hour we take as many pictures as all the pictures before 2008. You'll have to look it up. I didn't write it. Just seeing that graphic reminded me of that statistic.
30% of those are pictures of my 6-year-old daughter.
So we talked about how you got started in social media and where it kind of came from and grown out. And of course, whenever we do anything in technology, it's an instant success. And everything works perfectly the first time through. So that's it. Thanks. No. So let's flip it around. As you were getting started, can you tell about some horror stories that you maybe had to suffer through, or maybe a horror story that you maybe heard a friend of a friend, to protect the innocent, that you can think of? People who are responsible for updating their social media for their organization may also use the same machines that they use personally and may have been logged on to the incorrect account at time. That could be a potential horror story. Does any of you have a horror story that you'd like to share, or and how you dealt with it, and how you dealt with it as well too?
I'll just say that, skipping several horror stories that are too painful to relive, one thing that actually we constantly deal with at the zoo is for the most part, our Facebook, our YouTube, these are communities of people who love animals, who love the zoo. A lot of them are local, but some of them are all across the world and just really share the passion for our mission. But there will always be a contingent of society that does not agree with zoos or doesn't believe in that zoos should exist at all. And they're very vocal. And they see our social media platforms as a grand opportunity to share that point of view and try to change opinions out there. And in the very beginning, seeing those comments, it broke my heart. And I get so upset about it, and I wouldn't know what to do, and I would always overreact, because that's just what I do. And I would try to, they would say something, and I'd try to defend the zoo, and it would just turn into an endless back and forth dialogue that wasn't really a dialogue, it was just them kind of shouting, and me sort of saying 3 points back. And I kind of learned my lesson the hard way, that that's just not the way to go about having those conversations, that really the most effective thing I could do is kind of back off the conversation a little bit and let our fans come in and have the conversation for us. So two things tend to happen when we do get those sorts of comments. Either no one pays attention to it, it gets ignored, and it just kind of gets buried with better content and better stories, which is always great. Or our fans come in, if they're outraged enough, they'll come in and they will defend us and they will talk back. And sometimes I think I've paid them because their talking points are exactly what I would be saying if I were typing those messages, which is really great to me because it really shows me like, wow, okay, we've been having such good conversations with these folks that they know these messages, they believe in these messages, they can say them on their own and have it be authentic, and it's not just us sort of defending ourselves. So that's really shown me the power that the community building really has there through social media, and it kind of makes me sleep better at night knowing that I am not the one warrior who has to fight this fight, but there's a whole community of people out there who are willing to do that with us.
Anybody else have anything they'd like to share or communicate? Or?
Well, I don't have any horrific horror stories. I think that, you kind of, when you think about it, it's, oh, you said something bad about your workplace or something like that, but like, we work in an environment, like, all of our coworkers, we're friends on Facebook, we all talk about our jobs and, the events that we're doing on Facebook as advocates for our organization on our personal sites, so we don't really have that, fear of, putting some sort of like drunken night out on our organization's Facebook, so that doesn't really happen. But I think that I learned a lesson during our last fundraising drive over Twitter, because we had a really fun giveaway where we were offering studio time for bands to record as a giveaway, which was really exciting. If you're a band in Seattle, that's a huge opportunity to be able to go in and record with an engineer. And so I was really excited about sharing that and trying to promote that for people to make a gift, to call in and make a gift. There are a lot of rules around promoting contests and things like that on Facebook, and so you can't, it's kind of the no purchase necessary to enter sort of thing. So you can't say you need to call and make a gift in order to be entered. So I was posting about this on Twitter, and I was so excited to get the message across that we have this great giveaway opportunity that I didn't get so much to integrate that we're having a fundraising campaign. So it went out, and as soon as I posted it, immediately the phones started ringing, all of them, with people who were not making gifts and not even interested in making gifts. They just wanted to enter this drawing. And it made me realize, when you have such a small amount of space to make your point, you got to pick the right things to put in there. So in my mind, it's obvious we're in a fundraising campaign. I've been here all week. I know we're in a fundraising campaign. But people aren't paying as close attention to that as I am. And so you always need to be reminded we're in a fundraising campaign. This is what we're doing, and really be careful about the wording so that A, you're staying within the law, and then B, that you're inspiring the action that you hoped you did. And so what happened with that one is just seeing the response for that, we actually just took that post off of Twitter because it wasn't conveying the message we wanted. And now with things like Facebook, you can put more context in it. You're not so restricted by that. So we kind of said, okay, this is the better platform to promote this because we can do it in the proper way. So that wasn't I mean, it didn't turn out terrible, but it was a real lesson.
There's a question over
Hi,
here.
hi, Kelly. I'm a big fan of KEXP, and I really think that you guys are using Twitter really well. And your DJs sometimes talk about the conversations, and it's really engaging because it's interactive. And another good organization that does an excellent job is the Washington State Department of Transportation. And you know, they have a cool app on their phone, and they talk about what's going on. But I forgot the gentleman who's in charge of the Twitter and the tweets. He, you know, they post sometimes jokes and pictures, and it's just so, it has its own life. And sometimes they have negative comments, like you were saying about the zoo, but you gotta let it ride. You know, it's like transparency is, it's key, and it will really come back, and it'll help your organization.
I think that's a really good point, because I had the same kind of feelings where we're in a fundraising campaign and some people don't like the pledge drive. You know, they want it to be the regular programming, but that's just one of the necessary things about being a public radio station. And so while we're posting the drives, you'll inevitably get the people who are like, get back to the music. You want to, and like you said, it's, you know, at first when you first see these, you're like, oh, we want to delete this comment or something. You know, you don't want it on there, but when you leave it on, it's true that the people who are passionate about your mission and who are, they'll post, and then you'll see, you know, just like this line of posts where people, they won't have it. And so that's really inspiring to see that, where it's like, no, we don't, there is that open dialogue and there is that conversation. And I think that's one of the coolest things about the medium is that, you know, there's that instant kind of,
Yeah, the good engagement.
Yeah.
And one thing also that you have to be careful is if you delete something all the time and you monitor it, it could come back at you too.
Exactly. We just find it's like, no, just leave it up, and people have their opinions, and you know they're free to share them. So
I think that might, you know, I don't know of any failures that have happened at the University of Washington, and at least partially because we have not dove in on an advancement level and, you know, quite as deep as maybe some organizations have. But I certainly know that personally, as a computer information management professional, I think I kind of have a sense of what's going on in the computer industry, and I always felt like, well, Facebook didn't really initially appeal to me very well, because I was introduced to Facebook about the same time I saw Second Life, and as I looked at that, I go, this is stupid. It's like, and I kind of like felt about that like I think the popular kids in high school think about the Dungeons and Dragons players. I know that because I was one of the Dungeons and Dragons players. But I wasn't going to make that mistake again. So I really resisted going into the Facebook, the MySpace, that type of area. But there was a Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house a few years ago where she updated the time that dinner was on her Facebook page. I was an hour early, which has never happened on a trip to my mom's house before. And the hour that I usually spend taking computer viruses off of her computer and fixing her printer and the things that we as computer professionals do for our less savvy friends and family, I wasn't doing that. I was actually listening to them talk about things that were going on in my family that I didn't know about. So I sort of felt like I sort of missed this information management relationship building piece because of an aversion to sitting behind a computer more, when the reality is that once your friends and your family and your alumni and your business contacts are all out there, you start missing out, even if it's not something you kind of instinctually feel like you should be doing with your spare time.
I do want to come back to something you mentioned earlier, and I don't know if the situation has changed, but when we were going through a crisis in funding, we had a supporter develop a Facebook fan page for us, right? And it took off. So then we started saying, okay, we want that. And what we found out was whoever starts the Facebook page is tied to their email. And they can't give it to you because it was set up for individuals, not businesses. And I talked to the attorneys and everything else, and they said, you know, you're out of luck, pal, unless you really want to try and get them to just stop it and then get everybody to come over yours. So as an organization, we learned that, you know, even if I had been the one to start the Facebook page, what happens when I leave? And it's tied to mine. And what happens if I leave and I'm happy about leaving?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? So we remain concerned. This person is still a strong supporter of ours and has been willing to give us the administration of the page and stuff now. But still, legally, he needs to be.
It's a much more uncontrolled environment. So even if you did, sue and get them to either give up that, login administration of that, there's nothing to stop them from starting another page that says, you suck, and start kind of getting the information out, out there. So you really can't keep, these doors closed. And we've seen world events that you can't stop, people from sharing information and from, this consolidation of ideas and taking action with that. And I think the best way to really address that is to engage, let people vent, listen to them, and act on what you're hearing.
And we dealt with that too as Facebook evolved, because you're right, at first it wasn't set up for organizations, it was set up for individuals. So when we first started, however many years ago, the first KEXP page was KE as the first name and XP as the last name. And then there was another site that's called I Heart KEXP that was started as a fan site. And so as Facebook evolved and became more geared towards organizations, then that changed, and we have our official KEXP page, and we have our administrators that are, added through the channels where they should be added. And we encourage people who are on the other sites saying, hey, we want to try to migrate everybody over so that we're all on one site, but it's not that easy. And so those sites are still up there. And I think for a long time, we were posting, I don't know if we still are posting on both, because just as a fan, I had them both, and so I hid one of them because it was double posting all of them. So they're still out there. There's nothing that we can do about it, and all we kind of do is monitor it and encourage people to go to our official site. So.
I guess, and then I don't know if this has changed in the last year and a half, but we were looking at it from a legal standpoint. The way you have that set up, Facebook can bring you down, because it is supposed to be individuals, not businesses, and they don't recognize businesses. And within their rules, if you've got usernames and stuff where it's obvious what you're doing, and it has over a certain volume of hits, they can bring you down. And so lots of people are doing it. They're kind of doing it on the quiet. And so far, I'm not aware of Facebook going out and bringing something down.
That happened to me, actually. So before I worked at Whitham Park Zoo, I was working at the Burke Museum of Natural History on the UW campus. And it was before fan pages existed, so we had created a profile. We were the Burke Museum, first name Burke, last name Museum, right? And I had done tons of outreach on the campus. We got all of these friends, and Facebook noticed, and they killed our account. I was devastated, but then I read the terms of service and realized, oh, okay, fair enough. You told me not to do that, and I did it. And I'd actually talked with someone there, and they told me, well, we have this thing called groups, and then after groups came fan pages, and now they're starting to do some verification stuff. Twitter and Facebook are trying to make more official verified accounts, and they're allowing community pages to sort of be the unofficial fan, run accounts. I think the interesting thing that's sort of happened in between is that companies like Facebook and Twitter have realized that brands, the organizations that have presences on these websites, are the ones who buy ads. So they have started to be a lot kinder to us and have started to be more responsive to some of those needs. So I think I've actually in the past few years have had much more success recently trying to reach out to Facebook support and Twitter support than I have in years past. And I think that because of that trend and the fact that we've bought some ads over time, they're starting to see that we're an audience, we're a group that's worth working with to try to solve some of those issues.
I want to change gears here a little bit. We talked about this a little bit in the last panel about the data that is available through creating apps and interacting with an audience in these social media. But there's also other outside sources of data that you can bring in. How do you handle the influx of outside data that are being brought into your organizations, your acquired lists, your LinkedIn groups, and what is the benefit of all that additional info that you weren't getting before, but you are now getting from these different sources, or are able to have access to through these different sources?
I think that for us, we have about 50,000 people who are who like the KEXP page, and I know that there are applications where you can take your email database, which ours is about 30,000, and you can integrate it, and you can see. I mean, there's programs that will do this where you can put your email addresses in there, and it'll tell you who the matches are and what the social media outlets that your audience is on, so that you can kind of be aware of that and track that and know where you're reaching your audience through. We really focus on our social media as an outreach tool and more of an engagement tool, and kind of building affinity and making it a place where people can share information and see our content and interact with it. And so we've even realized during our fundraising campaigns that making that direct ask through Facebook or through Twitter isn't really what we want to do. We want to direct people to our website, we want to direct people to our blog, and we want to direct people to the air so that they're interacting with our content, and then they make a gift because of that. So we really use it just to build affinity. And so as far as, you know, taking that email data or taking data about the constituents from the social media sphere and then taking that and putting that into an email solicitation, that's not something that we currently do. And I don't know if we would. It's not a conversation that we've had, because I think that this technology is evolving, and so there's always kind of new decisions about how we're going to use this information. But I think that the information that the new Insights page on Facebook really provides a pretty good breakdown of, you know, the gender of the people that are in your Facebook sphere, the location, you know, what kinds of posts are generating what kinds of response. And so I think that's more the kind of information that we use and find useful when we say, okay, when we post, you know, information about a live in-studio performance, people share it, you know, 10 times more than if we post about a certain event. Or so we're more looking at what's the outcome of this rather than the specific email information and then using that for solicitation. Does that answer that question?
We have an opt-in philosophy at Whitham Park Zoo, so our thoughts are you can share as much as you want with us, but it's your choice to share that information, and we always will have some sort of privacy policy that will disclose, you know, how that information is being stored or shared or anything like that. But a lot of times projects come up. It's kind of easy to get siloed at the zoo. It's a 92-acre campus. I mean, it's really easy to just sort of be in your office, do your thing, and not really know what's going on with the other departments necessarily at the same time. So sometimes we come up with projects or ideas, and we don't always realize the data potential of what we're doing and how that might impact someone in another department. So, for example, we have an app, a mobile app that we created, and we're looking into integrating some kind of check-in ability. So you walk around the zoo, you check in at the penguin exhibit, you check in at the tiger exhibit, you check in, you know, at all the different places that you go to. If you opt in to share that information with us, that's interesting to us from our communications perspective, because that's telling us what animals are you interested in, and we know, okay, people are most checking into the penguins, let's put out some more penguin videos, right? So we're kind of using that data for our communications goals. But how interesting might that data be for some other departments? You know, I'm sure fundraisers might find that information really interesting too. So, you know, there's lots of potential for the same data set for all of us to kind of interpret it in different ways. And truthfully, we don't always share that potential. We don't always think, oh, what I'm doing actually might benefit some of the other departments. Perhaps, you know, we should be kind of working together on this. So that's something we're trying to do, make more institutional at the zoo. Particularly now we're in campaign mode. We've launched the public phase of an $80 million campaign. So we better all start talking. And those opportunities, we're starting to identify them a little bit more clearly. But it's certainly interesting to me because there's so many more possibilities that I kind of never realized, because, you know, my goals are to check off my to-do list and not necessarily to check off everyone else's to-do list. So I really think those kind of cross-departmental conversations are really essential. And like I said before, all of that information is great so long as people opt in to share it with you.
For a lot of the data vendors that we have worked with in the past, and still have current relationships with them. The ones that we can kind of have control over with the relationship. We've always defined our alumni system as being the system of record or the master system. And so if we have a data exchange with a company where they are hosting our data and they want to collect email addresses or update home addresses or something, we try to work out mechanisms so that when somebody replies to and updates that address, that it would actually update into our database, and then our feed would then feed back down to the vendor's database. It's a data nightmare if you have data updates happening in two different systems. Then you get into this reconciliation loop, and you can end up not knowing what data is correct or not. And then if your interfaces hiccup at all, you can't just sort of overwrite because you've got two different sort of unique statuses of these data records. So by defining that relationship up front, and the vendors don't really want to hear that because they want to steward your data, but then they want to use the mechanisms that they've built to update and maintain and have interaction with clients with that. But trying to get all that data transfer back and forth is very difficult. We have not had, we've done some pilot projects with some of the contracts or vendors that we don't have contractual relationships with, like Facebook and LinkedIn and stuff. We have not decided to pursue extracting out or scraping, harvesting data and trying to update that into our system. Personally, I think that sort of crosses the line of creepy. If I had a friend on Facebook that was doing that with my data and sort of like analyzing me, even if my grocery store, a gas station, was doing that to me, that would change my perspective of that relationship. And so I think we need to be very careful as we go forward with even if we can do it, do you do it, and does that honor the expectations? One of the things that I think social media does is it opens up people how they feel about you, and they can like you and they can unlike you for just as quickly. And you really don't, much like in a social environment, you don't want to offend people. And I think the value of harvesting more data is outbalanced by that potential offending and going creepy.
I was going to say, does anybody else have anything to contribute to the moral questions of, there's so much stuff out there that you can get, how do you, and the fact that that social media doesn't really live within the IT house. It tends to be within a business center or within a marketing center or within, it's somewhere else. It's not within the IT house, but they're wanting to say, look, we're doing this and here's some data. What are the moral implications and thoughts and things about that? Mike?
I can't say that. I was talking to someone in student calling last week about, and we were discussing some privacy stuff, and she just flat out said, "Oh yeah, my generation doesn't get to have privacy." And it was just, yeah, that's it wasn't like she was even lamenting it. It was just, we don't have privacy. That was something you guys have. I feel like that notion that how we sort of get creeped out about that. I still won't. I refuse to use my wife's Safeway club card because I don't. They don't need to know what brand of beer I'm buying. But I think there's a generation of people that really kind of maybe don't care about that.
But that the whole reason the UPC code was created was so that grocery stores could collect the information of what you're buying so that they could sell it back to the marketers to say, hey, look, he's buying beer and potato chips.
Kurt and I go shopping together and we pay cash for everything.
Yeah, go ahead.
I come from a different orientation than
right.
But that question comes up constantly.
Sure.
And what we're finding is it is somewhat of a generational thing. I have some teenagers and they can give a crap about, and they don't even understand why I would think that something should be kept quiet or whatever. They just put everything out there and they don't care.
I'm sorry. I don't think it's like a generation thing at all because I'm old. But I'm with a Master of Communication Digital Media, and Betsy and I are both graduate students who are studying this, and it's really about being authentic, and you get more credibility by being open and being yourself. And I was talking to, I forgot your name, but we were, he was talking about we're this known as the Sunshine State or something like that. And it's about transparency, and I guess Washington State has, I forgot, was it the highest regulations?
Most open.
Most open in the state, and our program is, I think, one of the most innovative programs in the nation.
Right.
And it just teaches us about how open. I mean, it's not so much of a generation that we're not afraid of exposing ourselves. It's I don't know if that's you want to elaborate.
I wonder, it certainly is generational, but there is also going to be a factor of age there as well. But when you're a teenager and you're in college, you don't have as much privacy need. If you've got children and you have a professional job and you want to sort of be able to start to control or your presentation, your reputation, and so I think it won't be the same as previous generations, but I think the concerns will raise as the need arises, and certainly as corporations and individuals and hackers figure out how to leverage information and data to impact someone's life. You don't care about it if it doesn't impact you, right? Another thing to worry about. But as soon as it actually starts to have an impact on your life, I think they will begin to care as well.
So you kind of brought up a good point there. And I want to allude back to Kirk's statement yesterday about when do you disclose and what the security breach laws of disclosure in Washington are. And can you talk a little bit, since we're on the topic of privacy right now, can you talk a little bit about, we took out 2 major pieces of data from our database. Can you talk about the social interaction that we had and I'll say consequences, although I don't think it was really consequences that we had with interacting with other people on campus, but then allude to how it really wasn't as big a deal as it was, and how can you interact with how can our data interact without having things like credit card number and social security number in there, and kind of maybe the security implications of that. I know I'm getting a little off topic here, but
well, for a number of years there was some very dramatic public loss of records that would show up that were newsworthy, and some of our local large companies lost data repeatedly, and it just sort of made them look like they didn't really have the ability to control this. Kirk's statement about presumption of loss is a good one, in that you should be preparing your systems in a way that you reduce your attack surface. That if you do get compromised or exposed, and there's no way to guarantee that you won't, either from an external hacker or an attack, or from a disgruntled employee. There's no way that we can truly protect these systems 100%. You want to make sure that you minimize what that loss would be. And when we removed credit cards and social security numbers, it wasn't data that we really needed. It was a convenience. We used social security numbers to make sure we could do matching because it was easier. Well, our matching algorithms now are more sophisticated and better than when we had social security numbers, but we didn't have to invent those while we sort of had the SSN crutch. And so sort of forcing that issue actually helped us evolve in those areas. So you really don't need to take those risks. On the question of would you still notify if you lost data that you weren't legally required to, that will be a policy decision when and if that event actually happens. And I think all of us may have a slightly different perspective of how we would want to be notified if an institution that was in charge, that had some of our information about our children, about our relationships, about the type of beer we buy. What people have different expectations of what they would want to be notified for, but until you get there, it's sort of a case-by-case basis. It would depend on the volume, the size of the loss, and what the data actually was before you could make that determination.
So we have email strategy, we have online presence, we have social media presence. Tony, why don't you start and talk about where do you see, kind of Donnie's question, where do you see us 15, 20 years in the future? Where do you see social media going, and how do you see it evolving?
Well, for us right now, we're we're really thinking about how we'll integrate aspects of social media into our own site. So that's something that we're working on right now. We have a partnership with Microsoft that we're working on so that people will log in and they'll have a My KEXP account, and then they'll be able to opt in, of course, to have these conversations with fellow music lovers. They'll have the option to like songs as they're coming up on the playlist. So making our own site interactive is something that we're working on right now because, like you said, right now we're working with these these companies that are doing it outside, and so we want to kind of bring some of the principles that makes that exciting and fun for people into our own site. And so that's where we're going. And so I think that integrating that is something that we're really focused on right now. And also just realizing that the platforms that people are using are evolving, and that smartphones are a much bigger part of our lives right now, even than they were 2-3 years ago. And so we're really working on making our mobile applications work and work well for people. We have an iPhone app. We just launched an Android app, but they're both very they're bare bones, like they get the job done. But from a fundraising perspective, there's a donate now button on our app, but when you go in, it's teeny tiny, and I don't know anybody who can go in and actually donate on the donate site. So really just making sure that the interfaces are doing what we want them to do, and that people are able to interact with them in a way that makes sense, and that we're looking forward. So we have plans for iPad and tablet applications, because just trying to keep up with the platforms that people are using and adapting to how people are using things rather than how is easiest, like how we want them to use it, how they actually are using it. So that's where I think we keep our eyes forward, is just using the best parts of social media in our own content, and then being aware of how people are using it.
There's sort of two big things for me that I'd love to see us moving towards at Woodland Park Zoo, and I think they are applicable to other institutions. The first is we've been doing this really great job of building this community online with social media, and there's this really cool experience when you physically come and visit the zoo. The two don't necessarily have anything to do with each other a lot of the time, and so we really love to kind of bridge those experiences. And I mean, I've always wanted to see people in the zoo taking pictures and getting a prompt that they should go post that to our Facebook wall, and then I'm sitting there in my office talking back to them, telling them about, oh, there's Nina the gorilla in the background, telling them all about Nina, really just kind of making all of those experiences come together. But the other big thing for me, and this might be more of my own personal interest than the zoo's, but that's okay, is it's great to have this online social community. What can we do with it? What's, all right, great, we're getting all these numbers, everyone's kind of there, waiting for us to give them something to do. So I'd love to see us move towards action. For me, let's get together, Facebook fans, and let's go, restore some habitat in a local park. Let's get together and have a meetup of moms with kids, and let's have a play date together. Let's kind of take the cool conversations that we're having online and see if we can move them into some kind of next step action. It doesn't have to happen in the real world, but how cool would it be if it did happen in the real world? So I really am interested in starting with those social communities, but kind of building from there and moving them towards that top of the pyramid, right? So for me, that advancement pyramid isn't necessarily about fundraising. As a communications person, it's about kind of getting them to talk to us, getting them to talk to other people about us and with us, and then getting them to do something with us. And whatever that do part is, I don't know, but wouldn't it be cool if that's where we were kind of headed?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I know we're videotaping this, but I hope we don't replay this in 10 years when we were all so wrong and realize that this stuff actually happened in 6 months from now, and 10 years is completely different. Because 10 years ago, we had no idea that some of this stuff was even possible, let alone could it be adopted so quickly. But I do believe that going into the future, we're going to have to step back from collection of data managing data, copying data back and forth, and moving more towards mash-up views into our relationships with people, rather than scraping data out of LinkedIn and then populating employment information locally and then trying to figure out how to get updates from that. Maybe our systems need to be able to go out there and connect directly into LinkedIn with the user settings that people have provided. And we view data sort of on our alumni and our donors' terms. They can decide what they decide to share with us, and we sort of link into LinkedIn to see that information. It's a challenge for reporting and aggregation of data and some of our traditional ways of working with information. But into the future, I think social media and computer technology is moving rapidly towards a direction of more end-user control. You have more control over how you present yourself, the relationships, what you like, what you don't like. And I think from our relationship, historical management past, we've sort of had a lot of control. We decide to call you. We decide to send you emails. We decide to send mail to you. You can tell us stop that, but you can't tell us with any degree of sophistication what it is that you want. You can tell us yes or no, but you can't. We didn't have a way to act on some of the information that we're able to store, like your preferences about what time we call you, which email you want to receive what things at, what your hobbies are. Even if we store that data, we can't act on it. And I think the expectation moving into the future is that we're better able to understand and tap into people's passions and interests and have a more, like I would say our fundraisers are highly evolved in their communication and relationship skills. When our fundraisers go out there and meet people and talk to them, they're very human, very in touch with them. Our computer technology is in its infancy for being able to sort of have that same type of grace in management of the relationship. And I hope that we are able to evolve the gracefulness of our technology and our automation to match the expectations of the people that we're trying to relate with.
I kind of want to turn the floor over to you guys. Are there any questions that you have for the panel or for the room in general? Yeah, in the back.
So there's like a comment to the question. First comment is that when you sign up for a site like Facebook or anything like that, everybody here knows how expensive it is to maintain a site or produce a site. I think it's naive to think that you own your data once you do that. So these companies are for-profit companies. I've worked in that area as well. I've worked in a startup company that was producing a free service, and the model is selling the data and selling advertising. The other comment is I think that students do have privacy needs that they're not aware of right now. This stuff, in fact, this data isn't going away. It's living electronically. So my question is there any responsibility that we would have for users to kind of educate them that if you're going on social media, if you're using our site, then you have to think about like essentially code of ethics on the site, or what are the repercussions down the road for using social media.
That's very difficult, especially for a young generation, trying to talk to them about the long-term health effects of the things that they're doing online and otherwise. It's hard for them to see that far down the road. I was recently looking at a Facebook feature called, I think it was Timeline, where it actually, the video, it wasn't really, it's probably in beta to some people, but I couldn't see it yet, but it actually kind of almost creates an autobiography of you, where it'll show your first post, like if there's the baby pictures from when you were born, from your parents because of your relationship, it'll show your baby pictures and sort of what happened from your other people's posts, and then it would like kind of chronologically go through your life, showing you as your relationships and your posts and as sort of as you've matured. The first thing I thought was creepy radar kind of went off, right? Because somebody is documenting and storing all this. But then I thought, well, I'm doing that. I'm creating all this content. They're just sort of compiling it for me. And then I thought, well, this is sort of like a legacy thing, which we'd really like to talk about legacy from a fundraising perspective and sort of where you've been and where you're going and the impact you've had. But I don't think we're really even ready to begin to kind of deal with that as a society, what that impact might be to have your life story sort of documented and stored out there but you don't own the content or the data anymore.
Does the Facebook timeline become our resume? I'm kind of toss that out to everybody.
No, I hope not, because like some of the examples, like in high school, like you broke up with this person, you got together with that person, then you broke. It's like relationship status stuff, right? It's not a professional resume. It's your life story,
Right.
But it's not a resume.
Right, but you know, employers now, you know, if you go out there and you look at Ladders or Career Builder or any of those, they are constantly telling you, maintain your brand. You know, treat your personal as a brand, and know that once you put stuff out there, it's never going away. I mean, one of my favorite things to do when I'm bored is to go to the Wayback Machine and look at old bad web pages that I used to design in the mid-90s and go, yeah, it's still out there. But yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say there's a new service that's sort of arisen from all that. Reputation.com, only briefly saw it, but the need is there to protect your reputation. That's what the service has come up to do. I don't know what it does exactly.
Yeah, I think they kind of advertise to doctors, lawyers, and like politicians.
Yeah. It sounds like credit repair, which you can't really do.
Yeah, Lilith.
I've heard the line that if you're not buying the product, you are the product. And I think that that's, you know, kind of what Shawn was talking about is how do you deal with a vendor who's not a vendor. Your institution, if you sign up for Facebook, is a product now, and not one that you can control. And I'm just kind of curious how other people have thought about that when using social media.
Yeah, you're at their mercy, right? And when Facebook pages first kind of the 20 times that they've like changed entirely what they look like, we hated it at the zoo. We had worked so hard to create this look, this branded look. We were directing people to our e-news sign up. We had this whole strategy, and then Facebook decided, without really telling anyone, we want it to look like this instead. And they just changed it all on us. And logged in one day and went, what happened? And we don't have a choice, right? There's not like a paying them kind of a situation where there's a contract and they change the system and we can renegotiate. We're at their mercy. We need to, if we want to be there, and we've decided strategically we do, then that's a change that we're willing to sort of keep up with. There are other sites that we've worked with that we decided we weren't willing to put up with those changes, or it wasn't worth the return to kind of be at their mercy. And so we've cut off those ties. We've closed those accounts, or we haven't been as active in updating them. But it is a very real issue for us, and the thing that if you haven't done it, please do. Read the terms of services for every network you sign up for. This is actually a thing we do in our office, is at least 3 times a day we find people, other nonprofits in the area, violating Facebook terms of service like crazy, because they're just not paying attention, and they're going to get caught, right? So read those terms of service, know what it is that you are signing into. We know that when we're putting our photos on Facebook, we kind of lose that control, and that's a really scary thing for us, but it's something we've decided we're willing to do because of the return that we get out of that. But if you're not willing to go through that, you know, then don't enter into that relationship with that company. And the only way you'll know that is by reading through that terms of service.
I promise I'll shut up after this. I want to clarify something I said about privacy. It is that I don't think people aren't going to want to control their privacy. What I really think is that people are more willing to accept that the information they put out there is open source. And what's happening is that we're sort of, I think you have to look for value added. So I accept that when I buy things on Amazon, they're then going to show me things that I might be interested in. And that's okay with me. If I walked into the grocery store and someone said, hey, here's the toilet paper you like, that would be creepy.
That's my $1 million idea. I want to take all that data, because I've never bought diapers or formula at the grocery store, but every time I go in and I buy fruit snacks, I get a coupon for diapers and formula. I want them to say, hey, you haven't bought this brand of toothpaste in 2 months, you're going to run out. Here's a coupon for that toothpaste that you buy. So that's what I want.
Would I like to walk in the store and not have to go around and find things? Sure, that might be cool, but right now it feels creepy. And so I think, I guess what I'm trying to say is you have to, people are willing to accept that stuff they put out there is going to get used. I know that, you know, if I email fantasy football stats to my friends, I'm going to get advertisements to buy football tickets. You know, that's a contract I accept. And if they're doing it well, I don't mind it. So it's when you're harvesting people's information and not giving them value with that, that's when I think it becomes unacceptable.
I think the big difference, though, is that there are things. 20 years ago, a photo about a spring break wild weekend was great because all my friends would be looking at it or sharing it, right? Today, that's not so great, and so that the permanent, how permanent some of these things are, and how your attitude about what's out there and available changes over time, and in that realization that what's okay now is not going to be okay in the future is what I think that the conflict that people are going to have to deal with.
Kelly?
A personal example of, you were talking about way back, and you were talking about, once it's out there, it's out there. I got an email last week from a guy who runs a real estate website asking if he could use the image of our house that we bought back in 2003 that I put on a website so that my family down in California could see the front of the house. And he said, can I use that? And oh, by the way, this other real estate site is also using the image of your house already. And then we realized that it was used on Mythbusters. There was an episode of Mythbusters where they were doing the plane and how it drops the blue ice and blah, blah, blah. They have this nice 2-story yellow house in the background. We're like, wow, that looks just like our house. That's so cool. Well, we saved the image. We used our iPhone, took a picture of it, put it on Facebook. Hey, recognize this? We looked at it later. It is our house. They had just, done some image stuff, taken out some of the identifying markers, took off the house number, but that was back in 2003 that we posted that image. I didn't even realize that site was still up, but yeah, it's out there. People are going to use it whether you know it or not.
Final comments from the panel? We're kind of running out of time. We got to get down to lunch. So, you guys have any last minute nuggets of insightfulness that you'd like to share with the room?
Well, I would just say that we're talking a lot about how we can or should or not harvest data from people, and what they're sharing. But I think that from our perspective, instead of us gathering this information and then trying to, use it for a solicitation or things like that, we want to provide our audience with the tools so that they can be advocates for our organization, because that's, I think, the way that we see that it works best. It's peer-to-peer, sharing that is working best. We have 50,000 likes on our Facebook page, but when you look at that audience, we have 12 million friends of friends. So for us, it's about providing interesting content that then they will share with their friends and that they will loop them in. And it's coming from a personal request from a friend, somebody that they know, rather than us taking this information and then putting it back to them in a way that they might be uncomfortable with. So I think that that's something that's important to think about is, your friends, your constituents, they're advocates for you instead of you having to be for yourself.
I wanted to speak quickly to data in the aggregate that's available through social media metrics tools. So all of those social media tools that are out there, there's some sort of analytics tool, either built in or third party, and it gives you such fascinating info that's really like a psychological map of your fans in the aggregate, so not necessarily just the individual. So one thing that I think is really interesting, that's my own cell phone, that's terrible, is on YouTube. When you post a YouTube video, you can track hotspots. So you can see what are the parts that piqued people's interest, what are the parts when they got out of there and went to the next video because they were totally bored. Well, that's really interesting info for us as social media people. We can model our videos on that, but how can we use that information for an annual report, right? How can we kind of narrow in on what was the soundbite that really worked? What was the image that they clicked back to because they wanted to see it 3 times? Those are the kinds of things where it's okay, that's great that the social media folks have that info, but how can it be applied to the other departments as well? So if you don't have access to that info, talk to your social media people because they probably aren't even thinking that that info might be useful to you. But there's so many possibilities if we can just kind of get it all in one dashboard and play along.
I would say Google wasn't the first search engine, but they were the best when people started using search. They became part of our culture. Facebook wasn't the first social media site, but they're the best when people started adopting it. They've now become part of our culture. So I think they're here for a long time. I don't think that necessarily makes me feel better. Having these companies sort of churn over and flip so that the data doesn't reside perpetually might make me sleep better at night. But I think they're here. I think it's not going away. And so we need to adapt our data management models to a world where we don't get to control the relationship or the data.
I think with that too is that there's so many applications, there's so many tools that you can use to measure all kinds of data. There's so much data that you can capture about your social media audiences. And so I think it's important to establish your goals first. What do you want to do with the information? What is your goal? And then find the data that will support that goal. Because you can measure everything, but it's how you put that data into practice that's really going to make the difference. It doesn't mean anything if you're not going to use it. So make sure that, because there's lists and lists, hundreds of tools that will help you measure it, but make sure that it's going to help you support your goals, whatever they are.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Lunch is again downstairs.